Okay, Revelation chapter number 18. What a great study this has been. And now where are we at in our study as far as the tribulation period, where John has tried to explain to us about how that after the rapture, which we believe is the rapture happens, and the world goes into this time of what the Bible calls the 70th week of Daniel, which is what Daniel called it, finishing up the work with the nation of Israel and all the promises that God's going to bring to pass and bring them to the point to they'll accept a Messiah. And so we got to see, what's this period about? It's the time the church is gone, but we're going to see how God still works, but we see how Satan is working during this time, deceiving and trying to bring all of his evil plans to pass and trying to destroy mankind and get people away from God as much as he can. So we look at it, and John tells us that there's going to be different types of judgments coming from God. Okay, don't understand that the tribulation period is not just a bunch of bad events that took place. It just happened to be happening bad. It's God sending his angels for judgment. Judgment for the ungodliness, the wickedness, and it also will bring Israel to its knees, and they will accept Jesus as Messiah. There at the end, the Bible tells us. So there's 7 seal judgments it opens up with. There's 7 trumpet judgments it's called, and 7 bowl judgments, and that will bring us to the end of the tribulation period. Remember how it comes on? It comes on with a peaceful start, with the Antichrist being a man of peace. Later on, taking a role as to the society as he is God, and he sets himself up in the temple that he allows the Jews to rebuild, and that makes a mark in the middle of the tribulation that goes into a time of great wrath and great persecution for the nation of Israel. So we see all these things coming to pass, and we looked at some of the key people, key events. We looked at the Antichrist, of course, with a false prophet. These workers of Satan. We've seen why Satan is doing all these things. The great dragon cast out of heaven. We saw how God sent his workers down, the 2 messengers, with great power and authority. Back, I think, at the beginning of the tribulation. Because remember, there's going to be people turn to God. Well, how do they know how to turn to God? Because the church is gone, the truth is gone. Well, God sends 2 messengers, I believe is very important. And through them, I probably believe that we know that 144,000 Jews originally will turn to the Messiah and become his missionaries to spread the news of this gospel. And I think this takes place early, and many people will turn to God, but then the great persecution will come, and the ones that do turn to God, most of them will be martyred, the Bible tells us, and their hatred for this groups of people that's turning to God during this time. So we saw these different characters, we see all these different things through the book of Revelation, and here, last week and this week, we've been looking at John stopping a minute and trying to explain a little bit what he talks about the religious Babylon and the political Babylon. Chapter 17 was talking about the false church, the religious Babylon during the time of the tribulation, the false religion where the false prophet and the Antichrist will work together to get people away from the true God of the universe, get him into false beliefs and false understandings. And he will suck people in and point people to the Antichrist, and people will worship the Antichrist as God. Remember, that's what he's going to demand eventually. And so the false church, the false religion here is going to point people to that. And eventually, again, what John tells us is going to collapse. False religion will collapse. And in fact, even the false prophet, the beast, the religious beast of the day, who once had a union with the Antichrist and the people, they're going to turn on him too, and they're going to try to eliminate him. So, this is what, it's always deception and always destruction and always no one's really for somebody. It's no really true union, no really true love. It's just what people can use everybody for their purpose at that time. And then chapter 18, there's the political system of the day. And so chapter 18 is John trying to explain to us that in the end times, the political and economic system is very destructive. It's going to be eventually headed up by the Antichrist, and it's going to be filled with greed. It's going to be filled with desire for more. It's going to be filled with people that's going to stomp on everybody to get their wealth. And then that's all going to be taken out from them. And they're all going to suffer and wail the fact. And that's basically what it's going to talk. So let's go down through here and we'll see this. In verse 18, chapter 18, verse 1. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with the glory. So John, his vision, sees this another angel. Remember, all these angels are coming to pass here in the book of Revelation. God's using them for the messengers, so they're very active. And this is a special angel that lighted the earth. He says, that was the brightness of this glory of this angel. He had a special message, and he cried mightily with a strong voice. A big message coming up. Babylon the Great is fallen. Okay, it doubles the word fallen. It's trying to express the devastation that's going to come to the political and economic system. The people that put their trust in it. In the end times, the Antichrist is going to deceive everybody who put his trust in his system. He's going to get people to buy into his system of buying and selling, and you have to have his number and his mark. And he's going to suck everybody in that he's God, and everybody eventually that system will fall, and the great will be the fall. He says that this Babylon, let me come back and remind us what Babylon's all about. But he says this system falls and has become the habitation of devils or just demonic activity, and the hold of every foul spirit and cage of every unclean and hateful bird. John's just trying to describe this. The end times is going to be just filled with the filth of demonic activity. It's going to be filled with all the most foul things in all the world as it deceives people into believing a falsehood that takes them from God for eternity. It's basically what he's trying to explain. Now remember, we look in these last two chapters, this term Babylon. Babylon has fallen. And so sometimes Babylon here, he refers to it as maybe just as a city. And then he talks about it more as a personification of a person, of this system. Now, Babylon, remember, has got this rich history in the Bible. If you back up a little bit from John's day, about 500 years, Babylon was a major city of the world. Babylon was the Babylonian captivity. The Jews was in. Nebuchadnezzar was the king, and he ruled the world at that time. And remember, it was a godless society, a godless way of doing things. And it gets its root, remember how we talked all the way back in chapter 11 of Genesis, to the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was man trying to make their way to heaven their way. It was rebellion against God, and the seed of idolatry, the seed of falsehoods began there. Right? We went over that some there last week. But that's where it began. And then down since the time of Babylon, that seed of falsehoods, that seed of idolatry has been creeped into religion, has creeped into political systems. And all the way down to the very end times before Jesus comes back, it's going to be at its height, and it's going to grip the hearts of people around the world with a great leader called the Antichrist, the beast. But John reminds us it's not going to last forever. Okay, it's going to come to an end. In verse 3 it says, "For all nations have drunk the wine of her wrath, of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies." John is trying to describe this system as some kind of an immoral woman that the kings and the earth, the people of the earth, just went in with in order for their own benefits. Basically he's trying to explain this so that we'll understand the kind of picture, the way God sees it. You see, man looks at the wealth and the greed and people gaining to the top and political power and great money power and all that. Man looks at it as the height of things, and God, this is what God thinks of it. He doesn't have a very pretty picture of it. He says the nations have been drunk with this type of understanding and belief in this system. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people." Now this is John's. Now it's a warning for those around. Don't get involved with a political, economic, and world system that leaves God out. This is a call of separation. There's always been a call of separation for the people of God. God in the Old Testament, He wanted His nation of Israel to be separate from the ungodly pagan countries of the world. And that's the reason he made them very unique. You know, where Israel always fall was that they always tried that they didn't want to separate. They wanted to sort of put in the unity with other peoples and other nations and other ways. And it was always their downfall. And when the church began, you know, Paul makes it clear in the writings, come out from among them and be separate. Don't get entangled with the ways of the world of ungodly thinking, ungodly ways. Don't be a part of that. So even in the church age, we're called to be come out. Separation from the wicked things of the world. And here at the end times, John is saying to the ones at this end times, don't get sucked into this. Don't take the mark of the beast and worship the beast. You know, don't get involved with all that stuff. These end time people, because he says, you know, there's going to be terrible consequences that will come through. He says, come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, that you receive not her plagues. He says, John says, God is going to bring a wrath against the system of the day, the political system, the religious system, all the ungodly folks of the day. God is going to bring judgments down. He says, don't get a part of that, or you'll be a part of God's judgment. It's a warning, it's a plea to stay away from these things. And for her sins have reached unto heaven. You know, as you sort of get the picture again, how Babel was trying to reach to heaven with their building. You know, God says man's sins here of the end times is their independence of Him, their godly, ungodly ways, their secular thinking. It's like a tower reaching up into heaven, but it's all tower of sin is what it is. And just like God destroyed the ones of the end time at the Tower of Babel, and judge that group, God's going to judge the end time people also. And then he talks about reward her even as she rewarded you. God's going to bring judgment in accordance to how their sinful was. And double unto her double according to her works, and the cup which she has filled to her double. God says, you know, you've been extremely ungodly, you've been extremely sinful, you've been extremely deceptive. He says, I'm going to bring extreme judgment back at you. That's what he's saying. It says, verse 7, how much hast glorified herself. Again, the Babel system is sort of explained like a person. She said she glorified herself and lived deliciously, or with great delicacy, with extreme wealth and ways. How much has she glorified herself and lived deliciously? So much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. You know, this system and its leaders are saying, hey, I'm a leader, I'm a queen, I don't need anybody. I don't need God. I'm no widow. I'm no old person that needs any help. I don't need God's help. I don't need anyone. That's what he's saying. He says, I don't see any sorrow. I don't see any judgment coming. I don't see anything like that ahead. You know, that's the system. Or we're you know, how much do we see that in our day? Oh, we're nothing wrong with us. Our nation's swimming in debt and things that would probably going to bring it down someday. And our leaders say, hey, we don't have a problem. There's nothing wrong. There's no judgment coming. Oh, but God says that this is what they'll be saying. But God says, oh, but yes, there will be. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day. God's going to bring it to an end. Death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judged her. Oh, God says, you know, they may think there's no judgment coming. They may think there's no end to their ungodly living, their secular living, but he said there's going to be. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication, lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. Like he says, one of these days there's going to be the leaders of this world who put all of their stock in this, especially this end times that John's talking about. When the Satan and his leadership of the Antichrist forms a 10-nation confederacy, they think they're unstoppable. They think they're the answer to everything. But eventually they're going to see it all crumble. And it's all going to come apart. And they'll sit and they'll mourn as they see their empires going up in smoke. He says, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour thy judgment coming. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. See, the system will fall apart and break down, and there's nobody anymore to sell their stuff to. There's nobody has anything that can buy anything with. Because, remember, we're seeing, as we've seen through the book of Revelation, all the judgments and all the plagues, all this stuff, there's nothing going to be, it's going to all fall apart. And John lists many of the things that would be, in his day, would be the important things of the merchandise. Here, let me just list these first of all. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and fine wood. That's a very expensive type of wood they made furniture with. And all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner of vessels of most precious wood and of brass and iron and marble. Basically, still in our world today, everything we buy and look and think's important is still some kind of product from these types of things. And cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat, all the things that traded it for foods, beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. As I thought about this and I read this about the end times and who are the merchants of the day, really, the wealthy merchants of the day? It's the people that do the stock markets. Where does people buy and sell merchandise today? With stock, everything. Everything is based upon stock. The price of gas out here is based upon stock. The price of foods out here is based upon stock. The kind of clothes you wear, the price of that is based upon the stock. Everything. And I got to thinking about this. What can cause the greatest damage in all the world of the economic sense? The crash of stock markets. It happened in our country, remember, for some of you remember it, some of you actually lived back in the day when the great stock market crashed and the nation went into a Great Depression. It took years to come out of it. But it's even going to be far worse than this. One of the things that's very strange to me in our day, but I understand it a little bit now, understanding this. We live in a world where there's extreme debt and economic problems, but the stock market is shooting up. People are making billions in the stock market. The wealthy are becoming wealthier. And it's just like he's talking about here. There's going to be some that are making multitudes of millions and billions of dollars. They're laughing and having fun. Everything's all right. They don't feel the pain of a high gas price. They don't feel the pain of high food prices. They don't feel the pain of it. They've made their money in all of this stuff because we buy all this stuff. We buy all this stuff. And long as the stock market's all right, long as the money keeps flowing in, long as governments keep lending monies to the other governments, it's all going. But one of these days it's going to come apart. And then it won't be worth anything. It'll all crash. Not just in the New York Stock Exchange, but London and Tokyo and every country in the world is going to crash. And it'll be worthless. Won't be anything worth buying or selling. And if you've got, it wouldn't make any difference if you got ocean liners full of oil. There won't be anyone to buy it. So I think this is what he's explaining. I think you put this in the context of the last days. Who are the great merchants in selling and buying? It's the stocks of the world. It controls the prices, everything. And as I look at this, I just feel that it's going to collapse. It may not collapse before the rapture, but eventually it's going to crash. It probably won't crash even at the beginning of the tribulation. I believe the Antichrist is going to. He'll be able to prop it up and make it look good for a while, but somewhere during the tribulation, it'll all crash. A terrible time. And people talks about the last word and the souls of men. People sell their souls for the wealth of New York Stock Exchange, won't they? They will sell their souls to make it rich and wealthy. They don't care their morals. They don't care what it takes to their family. They don't care what it takes to get to that top level. They'll sell their souls. And John says that people will sell their souls, but they'll all eventually come to a crash. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. At first, in the tribulation period, the wealthy won't be so damaged by the hardships They'll have their stocks and stuff and put up ahead. They'll have enough money to buy high-priced breads and all that stuff. But eventually, even all of their stuff they won't have anything either. It'll all crash with it. They merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. During the time of the great stock market crashes, people jumped out of windows in New York City to their death. They wailed the loss of They went in the day before. They were wealthy people. The next day they had nothing. The good people here in West Virginia, most of us that lived back at the time, they didn't have a lot of stocks. They went on ahead in life like they normally did, didn't they? Probably wasn't very easy before the crash. It was difficult then, so it was difficult after. But those who lived in luxury of the empires of the world financially, they didn't have anything. They weren't used to living without it, and they killed themselves. They died. They wailed. They lamented. And verse 16, the last, that great city that was clothed with fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearl. Talking about what city could that be? It could be any great city of the world. Any great place of merchandise. For in 1 hour so great your riches come to naught. And every shipmaster and all their company and ships and sailors and many trade by sea stood afar off. All the products that are still here in the 21st century are shipped around the world on ships. We ship our oils, we ship our vehicles, we ship steel, we ship coal, we ship all that stuff. It's on the seas all the time. But eventually all the loads of all that stuff will be worthless. And they cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? I can remember back when on 9/11, when the planes ran into the buildings there in New York City, that verse came to my mind, understanding how quickly things can change. On that September morning, it was bright and sunny and shiny, and people went to work, and people went to make their monies, and people went to do all their things. And then a matter of an hour, terrorists hit those buildings up there, and thousands would die, buildings would collapse. And I remember this verse, and they cried, they saw the smoke of her burning. When you remember seeing those pictures from the views of the sea, or back in the bay there in New York City Bay, it was just nothing but a cloud of smoke. That's just a little thing compared to what's going to happen in the end times when things really collapse. When armies of this world are collapsing or causing cities to collapse, and wars are going on, and attacks, and all this stuff is happening, it's basically there'll be many cities going up in smoke. And a loss of wealth will be. He's just explaining this. At the end time, it's going to crumble. At the end time, it's going to crumble. And they cast dust on their heads and cried and weeping and wailing. This is describing the extreme mourning, why they lost everything. They were people that were nothing but people of the earth. The only thing they valued was materials. The only thing they valued was pleasure, and it was all taken away. If the only thing you value is materials and pleasure, you can lose it all. That's what he's saying here. Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich, all that had ships in the sea by reason of her causes, for in 1 hour she's made desolate. John keeps talking about this 1 hour. So at the time when God acts in his final times, in the last days of this time, it's all going to come to an end quickly. And men won't be turning to God. They'll be just in wailing and lamenting the loss, because they were just people of materialism. They were just people who loved the monies of the world. They didn't care about anything else. It says, rejoice over thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you all. You see, from God's point of view, it's due day. It's the time to come. It's time to settle the scores. It's time to get the books all settled. See, people always say, life's not fair, life's not good. God doesn't ever take care of things. The rich just get away with everything. No, they don't. God's going to balance the books in one day, in 1 hour. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown in and shall be found no more. Basically, this system, this world system, is going to be gone and gone forever. That's sort of like in Daniel's prophecy of the end times. Remember the 10-nation confederacy in the statue of Nebuchadnezzar there. At the end, there was these 10 toes of clay and iron mixed. And what does he say? There's a rock, a stone cut without hands, comes out of heaven and smashes the statue and destroys the end time nations. I think that's what he's saying. It's going to be gone. All the temporal things of humanity is gone. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. Man in their sinfulness, they love the music they play, they drink by it, they commit immorality by it, they live by it. But one of these days you'll go down Bourbon Street in New Orleans and it won't be a place of joy. People say, well, we go there and we party, we have a great time. One of these days, God's going to bring it all to an end. There won't be the harpers and musicians anymore. No more craftsmen. The whatever craft he be shall be found no more. The sound of a millstone shall be heard of no more at all. And the ones who developed the great things that we use today. In John's days, it was great works of silver and iron and different things like that. In our day today, the craftsmen create these things we use here today, like computers and electronics. Some of the best machines we ever created in the history of humanity are at my fingertips here. But one of these days, it'll be gone. There won't be anyone creating these things anymore. They will be gone. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. There won't be any more joyful marriages in the end times during this last time. The time of rejoicing for the sinner is going to be gone. For thy merchants were great men of the earth, for by sorcerers were all nations deceived. Again, the last days is always a thing of deception. In her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. He says, remember, they're responsible for the death of the people of God during the last days. And God says, I'm going to settle the books. I'm going to settle it all. And John is just in chapter 18 is just trying to bring this thing to a close understanding. The ungodliness, the ungodly world that's out there now. It'll get worse. It'll be terrible. It'll be deceptive. It'll be satanically inspired. It'll be led by the evil empire, by the Antichrist. But make it sure you understand it's not going to win. God's going to crush it. And those who reject the ways of God and enjoys the morality of this world and live for sinful living will all be destroyed in this. Is what John's trying to say. What is this for us today? It's a warning. If you plan on living your life without God and going your own direction, and you think that you can build your empire on your own with your own humanistic thinking, your own secular thinking, your own worldly thinking, you think that you can sin and live life the way you want to and no consequences. You read what we just read. God's not going to bring it to an end. If you think that only material things are as important and nothing spiritual is, read this. Because God says, at the end times, it'll all come crumbling, and it'll fall, and great will be the fall. And that's the system, the Babylonian world system. And I can see this. This is already in its formation now. I don't think you have to be a theological giant to understand that. I don't think we see a world out there that's run by secular people who don't want God in it. We have a world out there that thinks the only answer and help for humanity is not a return to God, just more money in their pockets. You know, our president, he doesn't call a nation back to God in prayer and spiritual leadership. You know, it's only the answer is just let people be, morally whoever they want to be, and let people have money in their pocket, and if they don't have it, we'll provide it, and everyone's going to be all right. But it may sound good, but it's not the truth. And he says, and that's just some of the thinking that's leading us into the last days. And it's just not our country, it's Europe, it's France and England and Germany and all those countries that are our allies. They think the same way. We're not just an isolated incident, it's all over that area. And we know that the end time government rises out of Europe. The revived Roman Empire revived out of Europe. That's the thinking of Europe. That's the thinking of the United States, all the Western world. And it's heading that way now. But he says, saints, hang on. God's going to settle it. Saints, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. You guys in the church, and we'll take you out of there. And a lot of this is written here for those left behind. They need to read this. If they're left behind someday, they need to get the Bible out, and they need to find the Bible. They need to find out what's going on, because they won't have much time before Jesus returns back to this earth. But I hope we understand the importance of how important this is to God and what He said about it. It's not a joking matter. It's not a laughing matter. It's a very serious thing that we're heading to. We in the church, we have a message. We're not what are we to do? There's nothing we can do. But man, we got a great message. We can tell people they can turn to Christ and be saved and miss all this. We can tell people that hope and joy is not the material things of life, but the eternal things of life. So we're not like, we don't have anything to do. We don't have to be like people just rubbing our hands together and, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, you just keep up your Christian life. And you keep your spiritual life in tune and strong. And you share the gospel with people. And you share your testimony, how Jesus saved you. That's going to be the thing that makes a difference. And maybe some will listen. And maybe some will be turned away and won't have to go through these times as we've been studied about tonight.